This ain't just a channel, this is BBTV.
It's Thankful Thursday, a pause in the chaos to notice what still holds up, keeps us going, or surprised us this week in the best way. Gratitude lives here. It's
A boss be rising, BBTV's igniting, turn the volume up. Yeah, the whole world's invited from the gravel road to the neon dream. She built an empire out of broken wings. Boss be rising, sky ain't even the ceiling when she hits go live. Everybody feels it.
Howdy, y'all. You ever notice how we always hear the same kind of gratitude from artists? The big obvious stuff, right? The awards, the fans, the success, the sold out shows. And don't get me wrong, all of that matters, of course, but it's expected, isn't it? It's the kind of thankfulness that comes with the territory. What we don't hear as often are the quieter things, the uncomfortable things, the moments that didn't look like wins at the time, but ended up being the reason everything else was held together. So that's where we're going today, because sometimes the most important thank you is in someone's life isn't directed at the spotlight at all. It's directed at the moment that forced them to stop, or the person who saw something in them before anyone else did, or even the environment that gave them the permission to grow before the world had a chance to tell them no. You know what? It could even be the people who came back to them with their own stories and knowingly helped them make sense of their own lives. That kind of gratitude doesn't get packaged up nicely. It doesn't always sound pretty. Sometimes it's tied to pain and tied to loss, tied to being pushed into something you didn't choose but needed anyway. If you're not paying attention, you miss it because it doesn't come with a highlight reel. But if you slow it down for a second, if you actually listen to what these artists have said over the years, you start to hear it. The real moments, the ones that changed direction, the ones that didn't feel like victories when they were happening, but they turned into something bigger over time. Pardon me, hydrate. And that's what today is about, okay? Not the obvious gratitude. Hi, Jessica. How are you, doll? Hope you're doing well. So, the not so obvious, the kind that really sits underneath everything else. And that kind actually holds weight because when you understand what someone is really thankful for, you start to understand what almost broke them too. Now, that's a very different story. So, let's just get into this one. Now, you ever look at someone like James Hetfield and just assume he's always been solid? Like he came out the gate built for life, strong, controlled, unshakable, the kind of presence that doesn't, crack under pressure. And if you don't know who James Hetfield is, shame on you, but he is the lead singer of Metallica. So, hi, Niecy. How are you, plus sister? I've been doing pretty good. I guess you've been busy over there. Thanks, Silver Wanderer. Sometimes I do wear a headband, sometimes not. So, because that's the version that most people see, the front man, the voice, the guy who can stand in front of thousands of people and not flinch. Kind of got like a YouTube creator, right? But that version, that's the result. Okay, not the beginning. Before all that control, there was a man who was slowly losing it. And not in some dramatic headline grabbing way. It was quieter than that. It was the kind of unraveling that hides behind success, the kind that gets masked by all the noise and by the touring and performance, by always having somewhere else to be. So you don't have to sit still long enough to feel what's actually going on inside. And, James Hetfield has been honest about that part. He's talked about how he used control as a shield, how everything had to be his way or it didn't feel safe. A lot of us feel that way sometimes, right? So shutting people out felt easier than letting them in. And that's true for a lot of us too. For a long time, that worked for him, or at least it looked like it did. Because from the outside, Metallica was Metallica, right? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to be biased here. Unless it's the new stuff or the old stuff, I'm not real fond of the new stuff, okay? Oh, my husband's doing pretty good. Thank you for asking. He's moving right along, trying to get healthy again. How's Big Jack? I hope he's doing okay. Make sure and tell him for me I got it covered. I got his back. We're all good. Love you, girl. So, okay, the shows were still happening with Metallica. The music was still there. The machine was still running, right? Correct? But inside that machine, things were getting shaky. Relationships were strained. Communication was breaking down. And the biggest part of it all was James himself was reaching a point where he couldn't keep pretending he had it handled, right? Oh, I'm sorry, doll. I was just saying, just tell Big Jack I've got his back. It's all good here. Not to worry about it. Just please get well. Crazy man. I knew something was going on. Me and Walt kind of cornered him on the last show and told him do something. He needs to be better. That's all. So that's the part people don't like to sit with, right? Okay. Because we like our rock stars loud and untouchable. We don't always like seeing what happens when they have to stop. But he did stop. Thank you, honey. Love you. I said that too. I'll say it again. I love you, Niecy. That's my sister, y'all. Just letting you know. But you know what? He did stop. And not because he wanted to, but because he had to. There was a moment where everything paused, the band, the momentum, the expectations of all of it. And James stepped away and entered rehab. Good move, because then Metallica may not be anymore. So now that word right there, let's talk about that first, because rehab, people hear it and they reduce it. They think it's just about getting sober, just about moving one thing and replacing it with another, one set of complications for another. But no, it's not that if you utilize it. But when James talks about it, that's not what he focuses on. He talks about structure. He talks about being in a place where the rules don't bend just because of who you are, and where you don't get to walk out when things get uncomfortable. That's a good place to be when you're in that mindset, when you're in that bad place in your life where you don't get to hide behind status or success or the guitar like he tried to do. And for someone who spent years controlling everything around him, that kind of environment is not easy. That's confrontation. That's being forced to sit still in your own head without the usual escape routes. That's being told no. Imagine being James Hetfield and being told no. That's being asked questions that you don't want to answer. And here's where the gratitude comes in, because instead of resenting that, instead of pushing back against it, James has said he's thankful for it. Yeah, Thankful for people who didn't let him slide. Thankful for the system that held him in place when he would have walked away. And let's face it, a lot of people walk away and become a bigger mess. But he was thankful for the structure that forced him to actually look at himself instead of running from himself. That's a big step. And that's not surface level gratitude either. That's not thanks for the help and move on. That's the kind of gratitude that comes from realizing that without that moment, without that interruption, without that forced step, everything else might have disappeared. There would have been no more Metallica. Not just the band, not just the career, everything. Because he's talked about how rehab didn't just teach him how to stop doing one thing. It taught him how to be present and how to listen, how to communicate without shutting down or just exploding. I think a lot of us can do that. I need a little of that myself. Nothing wrong with therapy, y'all. Not a damn thing wrong with therapy. And if you need it, take it. Don't feel bad about it. Because how to sit with discomfort instead of numbing it is a much better headspace to be in. And you know what? Like I say, you have to go through it to get through it. And maybe the part that hits the hardest, he wanted to know how to be a father who's actually there. Not physically in the room, obviously, he's touring, but mentally somewhere else is not a good place to be when you got kids, right? Actually, there. And that's a different kind of learning. That's not stage presence. That's not even performance. That's life. And when you start looking at it that way, the story shifts. It's not about a rock star going through a rough patch. It's about a man being forced to rebuild himself in a way he never had to before. Because, face it, once you get it big, nobody tells you no. And if they do, you just flash some money, right? But that rebuild, it doesn't come from comfort. It comes from structure. It comes from accountability, from people who are willing to tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. And let's face it, they don't want to tell you, but it's necessary. And that's what he's pointed back to over and over again. Not the fame, not the success, not even the legacy, the structure, the system. The people who held the line when he couldn't. And because without that, there's a very real chance that everything people celebrate about James Hetfield today wouldn't exist in any way. And you can hear it in the way he talks now. There's a calm to it, not a polished, rehearsed calm, okay? A grounded one, the kind that it comes from knowing exactly how close you come to losing everything and choosing not to ignore that anymore. And that's where the real gratitude lives. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's not something that gets turned into a highlight reel. It's quiet. It's steady. It's in the understanding that sometimes the thing that saves you, it doesn't feel good in the moment. Sometimes it feels restrictive. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels like you're being forced into something that you didn't choose. But later, you realize it's the only reason you're still standing at all. And that's the part that sticks. Because when you watch him now, when you see that control, that presence, that ability to hold a crowd and not lose himself in it, you're not just watching talent. You're watching someone who rebuilt that control the hard way through structure, accountability, and being forced to face the parts of himself he spent years avoiding. And think about it. We do that too. So the rock star's human. And you know what? Instead of resenting the process, he's thankful for it. And that right there, that's not the story people expect to hear, but to me it's the story that really matters, you know? It's important. So, sorry. Let me ask you this too. Do you ever think about how one small moment can echo way further than it was ever supposed to? Like something that felt almost insignificant at the time ends up being the thing that quietly holds everything together later on. Corey Taylor is one of those stories because when people look at him now, they see the front man, the voice of Slipknot, the energy, the control, the presence that feels almost larger than life. But that version of him didn't come from a straight line. It came from chaos. I mean, a lot in the business seems like a lot of chaos to me. And, you know, instability. And growing up in an environment where nothing felt locked in, nothing felt certain, and nothing felt safe in the way most people understand it. And when you grow up like that, you learn to adapt fast. You learn to survive. But you don't always learn how to process what is happening to you, you know? You don't always learn how to express it. And for Corey, that expression didn't come naturally at first. Pardon me. It had to be pulled out of him. Oh, y'all have to forgive me. We have 3 seasons in Texas, not 4. We have winter, which is more like fall, because we get 1 day of some ice, maybe. We have first spring and second spring, which is what I'm dealing with right now. And then apparently we're having our summer early this year because it's supposed to be in the triple digits and your girl doesn't have enough AC to power this thing. So anybody want to donate to the cause, y'all go for it. Hey, memberships are still active, at least for the time being. I'm sure I'll get myself in trouble again soon. And here's where the story shifts, though, okay? Because the thing he's publicly expressing, I have something for my dry throat. He's publicly expressed gratitude for isn't fame or isn't success. It isn't even a band, you know, not even the platform he has now. It goes all the way back to something much smaller. A teacher, a person who saw something in him before the world ever did. One person who encouraged him to write. Now, that doesn't sound like much on the surface, right? A teacher telling a kid to write. That happens every day. But not every kid is carrying what he was carrying. Not every kid is sitting on emotions they don't have a place to put. You know, not every kid is one bad decision away from going down a completely different path. And Corey has talked about how that encouragement gave him an outlet, not a solution, not a fix, but a place to put things. A place to take everything he couldn't say out loud and put it somewhere safe. And that matters more than people realize, because without that outlet, those things don't just disappear, they build. They stack. They turn into something heavier over time. And when there's nowhere for that weight to go, it usually finds a way out that doesn't end well. And Corey has been honest about that too. About the addiction, about the anger, about the moments where things, they could have gone completely off the rails. And sometimes they did. But here's the part that connects it all. That early encouragement, right? That one person pushing him towards writing didn't just give him a hobby, it gave him a tool, a way to process, a way to survive his own thoughts. And later, when everything got louder, when the band took off, when the pressure increased, when the lifestyle started pulling in every direction it could, that tool was still there. That outlet was still there. And he's pointed back to that moment more than once, not as some nostalgic memory, as something he's genuinely thankful for. Because without it, he said he doesn't know where he would have ended up. And that's a different kind of gratitude. That's not thanks for the opportunity. That's you gave me something that kept me from losing myself later. And think about how often those moments get overlooked. A teacher encouraging a student, a small push in the right direction. It doesn't look like much in real time. It doesn't feel like a turning point, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it's the only thing standing between someone having a way out or having nowhere to go at all. When you listen to Corey talk about it, there's an understanding there, not just of what he went through, but of how close things can get to tipping in the wrong direction when there isn't something to anchor you. And for him, writing became that anchor. Not perfectly, not without struggle, not without mistakes along the way, but consistently enough to matter, consistently enough to give him a place to land when everything else felt unstable. And that's where the gratitude sits, in something small, in something that most people wouldn't even think to bring up years later. But for him, it's not small. It's foundational because it gave him a way to turn chaos into something structured, to take everything that didn't make sense and shape it into something that did. And when you see him now, when you hear that voice, when you watch that control on stage, you're not just seeing talent, you're seeing the result of someone who found a way to channel everything instead of letting it take over. And that doesn't happen by accident. That starts somewhere, sometimes in a classroom, sometimes with one person paying attention, sometimes with one sentence that lands at exactly the right time. And the wild part is that person probably didn't even know what they were setting in motion. They probably thought they were just doing their job, just encouraging a kid. Come on, we all have a teacher like that tried at least. Just offering a suggestion, not realizing that years later, the same kid would look back and say, that mattered more than you know. And that's the thread running through all of this. Gratitude that isn't obvious. Gratitude that doesn't come from the spotlight. And you know what? Gratitude for the moment that gave him a way to handle everything that came afterwards. Because without that, there's a real chance the story ends very differently. And instead of standing where he is now, instead of having the voice he has now, instead of just reaching people the way he does now, he might have been another story that didn't make it through. And that's why that moment, that one teacher, that one push towards writing still matters, still holds weight, sits at the foundation of everything that came after. All right, y'all. It is break time. Enjoy the song. I'll be right back.
She came from the quiet storms, built a fire from the ground, turned a whisper to a warning. Now her voice shakes the town. Every setback was a lesson, Every doubt became a key, unlocking something bigger. That's the rise of Boss Bee. When the lights go low, her vision hits high. She built a whole damn network off a promise and a try. Every sunrise, every moment, she's stacking legacy. This ain't just a channel, this is BBTV. Boss Bee rising, BBTV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel road to the neon dream, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss Bee rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. She's the queen of the comeback, the storm in the stream, crafting stories out of heartbeats, making visions out of dreams. Got thunder in the hustle, got a voice that cuts clean. Every mic she touches turns to power unseen. So let Bertha spin the numbers, let the views rise slow or fast. Boss Bee doesn't measure wins by echoes of the past. This moment is a pivot, this season's history. Bow down to the founder of the BBTV dynasty. Boss Bee rising, BBTV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel roads to the neon dream, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss Bee rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. She's got fire in the head, it's got truth in the frame. Got a heart that won't retire and a gift you can't name. Every loop, every letter, every dream she sets free. It's a love note to the world sign. Boss Bee. And the world keeps watching as the numbers climb, but she's counting all the moments, not the dollar signs. From the late night grind to the daylight scene, she's building something bigger than the algorithm's dream. Boss Bee rising, BBTV shining. Her story's rewriting, a legacy in real time. Boss Bee rising, BBTV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel roads to the neon dream, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss Bee rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. BBTV, where the stories breathe. BBTV, where the dreamers believe. Boss Bee rising, watch her take her place. This is BBTV, this is her grace.
All right, besties, moving right along here. Here's another question for you. Do you ever think about how confidence actually starts? Not the kind that people perform later on, the real kind. The kind that, shows up before the world ever gets a vote. Because when you look at Lzzy Hale, okay, it feels natural, right? Hailstorm, for those of you that don't know. She was always meant to be there, standing on stage, owning it, not asking for permission, not second guessing whether she belongs in a space that hasn't always been welcoming to women. But that kind of presence doesn't just appear out of nowhere, it gets built early. Sometimes so early you don't even realize how important it is until much later. And for Lzzy, that foundation didn't come from the industry. It didn't come from a label. It didn't even come from someone handing her a shot after years of being overlooked. It came from home. It came from her parents, and not in some general, they supported me kind of way, in a very real, tangible way. They built her a stage in their basement. Let that sit for a second. Okay. Not go practice in your room, not keep it down, not maybe this will work out someday. They made space for it, loud space for it, creative space, as a place where she could be exactly what she was becoming without being told to shrink it down. That's some good mama and daddy to me. And that kind of environment, it does something to a person. That kind of support. Okay? Because when you grow up being told directly or indirectly that you're too loud, too different, too much for the space you're in, you start adjusting. You start pulling back. You start questioning whether you're supposed to be there at all. I can tell you that is probably a real good reason why I don't sing publicly. I have a voice, but I also have a fear because I didn't have a lot of support with that voice. You know, I was told, yeah, okay, of course you can be in choir, you do whatever you want to as long as you graduate, right? But when the opposite happens, when the people around you say, no, louder, that changes the trajectory. Pardon me, I can't speak today. Words they're not my friends. And, you know, she has talked about that, all about how having that space, having that encouragement meant she never really questioned whether she belonged in rock music. That's a big thing. You know, sit with that for a second. Think about that hard and long, because in a genre where women have constantly had to prove themselves, where they've been second guessed, overlooked, or pushed into boxes that don't fit, she walked in already knowing she belonged. Not because the industry told her she did, because her foundation told her. And that's the part she's expressed gratitude for, not the fame, not the success, not even the moments on stage, the beginning, the environment that made all of that feel possible before it actually was. And that wasn't, it's not something people talk about enough as far as I'm concerned. Because when we tend to focus on the breakthrough moments, the big wins, the first album, the first tour, the first time everything clicks in place. But what about the part before that, right? The part where someone either gets encouraged to keep going or quietly pushed to stop. Because for every story like hers, there's probably thousands where that space didn't exist, where the noise got shut down and the creativity got redirected into something safer. You know, the question of, do I belong here, never got answered with a yes. And when you hear Lzzy talk about it, there's a clarity there. She knows exactly where that confidence started. She knows it didn't come from fighting her way in later. It came from never feeling like she was outside to begin with. And that's powerful. It didn't just give her skill. It gave her identity. It gave her permission before permission was ever needed. And that changes how you move. It changes how you show up. It changes, you know, how you handle the moments where someone does question you, because they're going to. but you're not building your confidence in that moment. You're leaning on something that was already there. And that's where the gratitude sits for her, in something that most people would overlook: a basement, a stage. Parents who said, go ahead, make noise, instead of tone it down. It sounds simple, it sounds small, but it's not. It's foundational. Because without that, there's a very real chance the story looks different. Maybe she still finds her way there. Maybe she still pushes through. But maybe she spends years questioning something she never had to question at all. And that hesitation alone, it can change everything. And when you see her now, when you hear that voice, when you watch her take up space without apology, you're not just seeing talent. You're seeing the result of someone who was never taught to shrink. It's true. Someone who was given room to grow before the world had a chance to push back. And instead of taking that for granted, she's thankful for it. Thankful for the people who created that space. I would be too, right? Thankful for the environment that made it possible to be who she is. And she's amazing. Thankful for the beginning that made everything after feel like it was exactly where she was supposed to be. And that's a different kind of gratitude. It's quiet, it's early, it's easy to miss if you're not paying attention, but strong enough to carry everything that came after, you know? Alrighty. I do have one more artist I'd like to talk about with gratitude, because I just think it's, necessary. It is Thankful Thursday, my friends. I'm sorry, I'm getting it all loaded up here. It's kind of crazy today for me. I don't know why, don't ask. It just is. All right, we are in here. So here's another question for you. Do you ever notice how some connections don't go one way? Like, we're used to hearing about artists saving people, right? Oh, your music saved my life. That song was, hey, Anthony Hamilton, Charlene, he wrote that song for me. I just know it. Right? Fans finding meaning in music, finding comfort, something that helps them get through whatever they're dealing with. That's an easy gratitude moment, right? That's the story we hear all the time. But what happens when it goes the other direction too? When it's the artist that isn't just giving something out, they're getting something back that they didn't even realize they needed. That's where Jonathan Davis's story sits, because when people look at him, they see intensity, they hear pain in his voice, they feel something raw that doesn't sound polished or cleaned up. And that's not an accident. That comes from real experiences, real trauma, real things that don't just disappear because time passes. And for a long time, that weight stayed internal. It stayed in the music, sure, but it wasn't something that got processed in a way that actually helped him move through it. It just existed. And when you carry something like that, it doesn't just go away on its own. It sits there. It shows up in different ways. It shapes how you see yourself, how you interact with people, how you handle the world around you. And then something started happening. Fans began showing their own stories, not surface level stuff, real stories, trauma, pain, things they had been holding on to the same way he had. And instead of just hearing it and moving on, it landed, it connected. Because for the first time, it wasn't just his experience sitting in isolation, it was a reflection. Other people carrying similar weight putting it into words, showing him that what he had gone through wasn't something that only existed inside his own head. And that changed something, because when you see your own experience mirrored back to you, it does something different than just talking about it yourself. Okay. It validates in a way that's hard to explain if you never felt it. It makes real in a way that that's shared instead of isolated. And Jonathan has talked about that, about how those fans' interactions didn't just mean something to him. They meant something to they meant everything to him. They helped him process his own past. They helped him start to understand things in a way that he hadn't before. And that's a different kind of gratitude. That's not thank you for supporting music. That's thank you for showing me I'm not alone in something I thought I had to carry myself. And that's heavy, because it flips the entire dynamic. The artist isn't just the outlet. They're part of the exchange. They're part of the healing process too. And that's not something you hear talk about, because we tend to put artists in a position where they're supposed to be the ones holding everything together, the ones giving people something to hold on to, but they're human too. That's my whole point of this show. They're carrying their own weight too. Everybody's got skeletons, baggage in the closet, and we all carry that closet on our back. And sometimes the people listening end up being part of what's helped them face it. And when you think about it like that, the relationship between artist and audience, it changes. It's not one-sided. It's not just, here's music, take what you need. It becomes something shared, something that moves in both directions. And that's where Jonathan's gratitude sits. In the people who were willing to be honest, in the stories that came back to him, in the moments where someone else's truth helped him understand his own. And that doesn't erase what he went through. It doesn't fix it overnight, but it gives context. It gives it connection. It gives it something to stand on instead of just floating around unresolved. And that matters, because without that, there's a good chance a lot of that stays locked in the same place it always was. Unprocessed, unspoken, unshared. And when you see him now, when you hear that emotion in the music, when you feel that intensity that hasn't been watered down over time, you're not just hearing pain. You're hearing something that's been shaped by connection, something that's been influenced by knowing it's not just his story. And instead of keeping that distance, instead of separating himself from it, he's acknowledged it. Okay. He's thankful for it. Thankful for the people who were willing to share something difficult. Thankful for the way those stories came back and helped him face his own. And that's a different kind of gratitude, not loud or obvious, but real. Because sometimes the things that help you heal isn't someone fixing it for you. It's realizing you were never the only one carrying it in the first place. And that right there, that changes everything. At least it does for me. So that right there is one of those moments that stays with you, not because of what happened on the surface, but because of what it represents once you really sit with it. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't just about a fall, and it wasn't just about an injury. It was about a decision. It's a decision made in real time under pressure in the front of a crowd. And this is, please forgive me, I'm not quite sure. But see, the thing about this is, the point I'm trying to make here is that even rock stars, musicians, artists of any kind, they all have human qualities, just because one song, I mean, Beyonce's Hero, okay, now she's my hero. I love that song. Let me tell you, I love that song. But here's the thing. Somewhere along the way, when she was writing that song, there was a reason behind it. Okay. People don't write songs just to throw words together. There's a meaning to all of it. And when someone has a hard time being an artist, being out there out front all the time, and they're going through life changes that we all go through. I mean, parents passing, family members not liking us, things like that, real human things. And then they can turn around and in their fans, in their families, their friends, friends from way back, things like that. They find some kind of way back from that mess, or find their way through it because somebody already gave them the shoes to walk. It's important to find those things that you should have been grateful for in the first place. I mean, the small things. Okay, yes, building a studio in the basement for your daughter is not a small thing. Not by any means. Obviously, it's going to cost a lot of money. Obviously, it's a lot of effort. But that's not the point they were making when they built that for her. The point that they were making was, whatever you want to do, we know you can do it and we support you. Here's the tools. And that's how every parent should be, to the best of their ability. I'm not going to say that somebody out there can build their child a basement, okay? I'm not saying go do that, because that may not be you may just not have the money for it. I know I don't. But listen, she felt no shrinkage, I guess is a good way to put it. She knew she had a way about herself, and she knew she could do it. And her parents told her she could. That's a lot. That is priceless, if you ask me. Anyway, I'm going to get off of that subject, and I'm going to let y'all go now. But like I always tell you, y'all get over there and see my buddies at Tuber Chat. They are amazing, and I couldn't do this without them. Hey, it's a team effort. And definitely get over to my brother's site over there with the ISIU, Iron Sharpening Iron Universe. They're great. And hey, we love the support. I'll buzz you later, guys. Love you.
I want to take a minute to shout out Tuber Chat. If you're a creator who's tired of surface level advice, and actually wants to understand how YouTube works, that's the space. It's real conversations with real creators who are in the trenches, building channels, testing ideas. No posturing, no gatekeeping, no fake guru energy, just people sharing what's working, what isn't, and why. If you're serious about growing, learning, and not doing this alone, check out Tuber Chat. The link is in the description. If you're enjoying this show, subscribing is the easiest way to support what's being built here on BBTV. You'll see the join button right next to subscribe. No pressure, no expectations, just an option for people who want to support the channel in a real way. We're live every day at 3 p.m. Central now. And don't worry, we didn't change the heat, just the clock. And if you've got a story you want to share, send it in. Anonymous is always fine.
A boss be rising, BBTV.